I'm going to talk to you tonight about science. So I'm not going to talk to you about training programs and that you can get from your coaches, but let me tell you a little bit about the science that can be of use to you as you think about how to make yourself a better athlete. So this is science and the athlete. This is about how you can use some fairly simple science to take where you are in the pack today and move yourself forward and see how far you can move yourself forward. That is the journey I have been on. So let's assume you are a keen middle-of-the-pack runner and you're open to new ideas. If you're just fixed in your ways, you might as well leave now. And you're not afraid of failure. The one thing I can absolutely promise you in your journey through years of running, and for some of you at front, you've got more years ahead of you than others like me, failure is going to be your friend. Failure is all the state of mind. You can either feel humiliated because you've got too big an ego to be allowed to fail, or you can say, no, maybe I just learned something interesting. Failure is data. Other thing to note here, as you see us go through science things, I'm not a doctor. I have no particular financial interest in what I'm about to say. I'm not here to peddle you a product. And for those of you who are whiz mathematicians, please note the calculations are all approximate. And with that, on. Okay, where are we? Most of us are here in the middle of the pack. Those are the genes I was born with. If you're very lucky, you're a mutant. So, do we have any mutants in the room? Okay, we have very shy mutants. So, this is all about how to take yourself from here to here. What are simple things you could do to go from here to here? So let me tell you about some of the things I've learned. We're going to talk about fuel, because if you run anything of a marathon length or longer, you have to know about fueling your body. We're going to talk about hydration and electrolytes. This is one of the most subtle areas of long-distance running. It is one of the easiest things to screw up, and I'm in my mid-50s, so as an Elite Immortal, I think I'm somewhat nearer to testing that threshold than most. And this is one I find is still a tricky one. I'm going to tell you some interesting things about antioxidants and fatigue, things that it's out there in the literature. Most athletes don't know it, though. And then we're going to blow up a few myths about cramps. And then, if you're still awake, we shall nervously tiptoe into the unknown. Okay, fuel. So for all of those of you who are driving around hybrids or mixed fuel cars, you are a hybrid. You burn carbohydrates and fat, roughly 50-50. The faster you run, the more carbs, slower you run, it's more fat. And just looking at this crowd, obviously fat comes for free. No, seriously, folks, even if you're skinny like me, you still have plenty of body fat. 1 pound of body fat. Okay, any guesses out there? How far could 1 pound of body fat get you? Any guesses? 50 miles, 1 mile, what's that? 20 miles? Get you about 35 miles. 1 pound of body fat is 3,500 calories. And if you need to test that, there is an awesome looking cake back there in the auction. Okay, fat comes for free. Here's something you should remember. 1 mile on the flat is 100 calories. 50 miles on the flat, 5,000 calories. There's another thing you need to know when you're doing your hill climbing. Every foot you go uphill costs you the same as 10 feet horizontally. So, if you gain 5,000 feet, that's 1 mile. There's approximately 5,000 feet in a mile. That gain in height will cost you the same as running 10 miles on the flat. So if you're going to do a 50-miler, which has about 10,000 feet of climb in it, so there are quite a lot of, here in the West, quite a lot of 50-milers look something like that. How many calories is that going to take? Well, now we know the answer, because the 50 miles on the flat is going to be 50 times 100. 10,000 feet of climb, that's 2 miles of climb. 2 miles of climb is the same as 20 miles on the flat. So it's going to cost you the same as doing 70 miles total on the flat, which is 7,000 calories. Okay, what do you start with? Everybody, when you start out, you have some carbohydrates in your system, so in your liver and your legs. So you've got about 1,500 calories of glycogen at the beginning of the race. And you are going to burn 7,000. You have a problem. And if you don't know what bonking is, you're going to find out pretty quickly. Bonking is where you run out of carbohydrates. And you basically grind to a halt. So that you now need to figure out where you're going to get 7,000, minus 1,500. Okay, who's good at math? How many is that? 7,000 minus 1,500? 5,500, right. So you need 5,500. Some are going to come from your body fat, and the rest you're going to have to take. What are you going to eat? So let me talk to you a little bit about carbohydrates. What your body really likes is glucose. So you might think, okay, I'll take lots of glucose with me. Best possible fuel. Not quite. When you mix glucose with water, the strongest glucose solution that you can get through your stomach is about a 6 to 7% solution of glucose. So that's more dilute than a can of Coke, for example. And that's only got 250 calories per liter of fluid. Call it a quart. So that's about 2.5 miles per quart of fluid. It's not very efficient. You're going to have to drink an awful lot of fluid to be able to take in several thousand calories. Because look at that, if you wanted to get 2,500 calories in you, you'd have to drink 10 liters, which is more than a couple of gallons of fluid. Okay, who here wants to carry a couple of gallons on their back? Okay, no volunteers. Has anybody ever heard of maltodextrin? Well, you might notice it on the back of a lot of foods you buy. It's an additive, but it's actually a short glucose polymer. And the nice thing about it is it's water soluble, but you can digest, instead of a 6 or 7% solution, you can digest a 20% solution. Boy, that's over 3 times better. Look at this. You can now fit 800 calories in 1 liter of fluid. We're now starting to get somewhere. And this is why you may be wondering now, when I go down to the athletic store and I shell out $1 for one of those little foil sacks, okay, guess what's in it? They all have maltodextrin. So here's your first science moment, folks. You've just spent $1 to buy a little capsule, and its key ingredient is maltodextrin. So I challenge you, next time you go in the store, turn them all over and look at the first ingredient. It's maltodextrin. That, one take-home point, the fuel of choice is maltodextrin. Next slide. And guess what? It's dirt cheap. I looked up on Amazon when I put this slide together. Here's an 8-pound container of maltodextrin, and they're going to sell it to me for 23 bucks. Okay, I warned you there's going to be a bit of math here. So let's do our comparison. I spend 23 bucks for 8 pounds. 8 pounds is 14,500 calories. I bet you all knew that. No, actually, the way you do it is, it's easy. 1 gram of carbohydrate has 4 calories. That's all you need to know in life. Everything else you can forget. 1 gram of carbohydrate is 4 calories. And then you just have to know how many grams are in a pound. Anyhow, you can do the math, and you'll find that that contains the same number of calories as 130 power gels. And when I look up the cost of the power gels on Amazon, that's $140. Okay. The science athlete, as you can see, this guy here looking absolutely spiffing and dashing. The science athlete spends 23 bucks. The athlete who only reads what's in the running magazines or sports magazines spends $140. Okay. Who do you want to be? The runner on the left? Or this one? Your choice. But there's a take-home point here, which is that power gel or whatever you're buying, it really does work. You'll probably get sick of them because they have sugar in them as well. But they do work, but you're paying an awful lot. Next slide. Okay, this is what you came here for. This is where you make your money now, folks. You can make your own gel, and it's an incredibly complicated, difficult, arcane. You need a PhD in biophysics, neurobotany, and everything else. Okay, get your mixer out. It's maltodextrin. You stir in water, add your favorite flavor. You can put some electrolytes if you want. You're done. Stir. Okay, it's easy. You can make yourself 4,000 calories worth of this stuff in about 5 minutes flat. And then you can get some of those nifty flasks. I said I wouldn't peddle anything, but you are actually sitting in a company who makes some really nifty flasks. Put them into flasks, put them in the freezer, and just take them out when you need them. They'll keep forever in the freezer. And flavor. Here's your opportunity to experiment. You can put in coffee, cocoa, vanilla, almond, soup. You can put a soup flavoring in. I mean, my favorite is strawberry and chopped liver ripple. Experiment. I mean, the worst that can happen to you, you'll throw up. Okay, big deal. Anyhow, I've just saved you a ton of money. And the calculation I gave you on the earlier slide about how many calories it costs you to run a mile and how many calories, how you convert uphill into the equivalent horizontal distance. You have everything you need to know to figure out how many calories do I need to run the next race that's coming up. How many calories should you pack? You can now do that from this presentation. It's all there. Next slide. Okay. Let's go on to hydration and electrolytes. In my experience, this is the hardest thing to manage in doing very, very long distance running. And the reason it's very hard is because we don't have good dials on us. I mean, there's nothing really you can look at to say, okay, am I well hydrated, am I not? But all you can tell is, do I feel thirsty? And the other thing people will tell you, yeah, you should be peeing regularly and it should be clear. Yeah, well, I've got news for you, bud. 2 things. Why it's important to manage is, before you even know you're off, in terms of you're dehydrated, you're overhydrated. You're already 5–10% off on your pace. That's significant, and you haven't got any symptoms yet, but you are 5 to 10% slower than you should be. Now, for a lot of you, just think about what that's going to mean on many of your races. If I could make you 5 or 10% faster, I'm going to move you up in the pack by quite a lot. So you need to understand this slide because it's going to have a big impact on your performance. But you're going to have to run some experiments here to see how it works for you. First thing you need to know is that your kidney function for most athletes decreases. So you're out on that long race. You could be drinking as much as you like. A lot of athletes will not pee. And it's because there's a hormone called antidiuretic hormone, which goes up. And it also makes people a little bit thirsty. And we see this in marathons where people drink far too much water and they get to the end of the marathon and they're complete toast. They have hyponatremia. And they still feel thirsty. And for those of us, on even longer distance races, you might think, well, I haven't peed for the last 30 miles. Does that mean I'm dehydrated? No, not necessarily. You might not have peed for the last 30 miles, and you might be way overhydrated. And it's because ADH is stopping your kidneys from producing water. So you may be, I may weigh you after that 30 miles, and you are heavier than you were at the beginning. So one of the things we've noticed in ultra sports is we see more problems with overhydration, believe it or not, than underhydration. We see more people finishing marathons, who are basically sort of finishing them like this because they're totally hyponatremic, than we see people who are just, too thirsty. Clues you might spot. You might see swollen hands. So if you notice during an event your hands are beginning to swell, that might be a sign that you're getting overhydrated. That's if you're having mild hyponatremia. So you're kind of in this range. By the time you get to severe, so your impact, you're already way over 10% slower at this point. You're going to have people who can't keep a straight line. And the most extreme case is they have runner's lean. They are moving along like this. And the reason is because their brainstem, which controls their balance, posture, and gait, is all screwed up. So believe it or not, it affects your brain. And if you go on beyond severe, the next case down here is called death. But we're not going to talk about that today. So now I put the fear of you-know-what in you. So let's talk about things which affect your hydration. Sweat, because if you run, you're going to sweat, so that's something you're losing. And drink is what you put in. So how do you keep the two in balance? So one thing you need to know is that you can lose about 1 to 2 liters of fluid. You could sweat that out easily in an hour. So in a dry environment like this, you would be sweating hard, but you might not really feel wet. Your t-shirt might be quite dry, but you are losing a lot of fluid. And I'll come to some of these numbers later, but as you sweat, you are shedding electrolytes. You are losing electrolytes. How does that impact you? And for those of you taking notes, we'll get some of this up online later. You know that most of your body, we all contain a lot of water. But here's a key fact you need to remember. Where is that water? Water is either in your blood or it's inside your cells. All the electrolytes you care about are in the blood. We don't care about sodium in cells, and this is because sodium ions don't really cross cell boundaries. They stick to your bloodstream. So if I pour more water into your blood, it gets more dilute. If I take sodium out of your blood, it gets more dilute. So we now have to go figure out what this all means. So there's a little bit of math here, but your sweat contains 30 to 50 of a special unit, 30 to 50 units of sodium per liter, but your blood contains 140. And what you can do is you can work out how much would I have to sweat, and then assume I'm drinking water to replace it to end up hypernatremic. And the answer is 3 to 5 liters of sweating, which you replace with water, you'll be hypernatremic. And you can see it doesn't take many hours of running to put yourself now in that state. So a few hours of running, you can be hypernatremic. So you're now 5% off in your performance because you're a little bit dilute. You're not really noticing any symptoms, but you're running 5% slower than you should be. So the point of this all is it's very easy for you to become hypernatremic and not even know it. And you say, yeah, but, you know, I drink Gatorade, I drink Powerade, I drink Roxane. Isn't that helping? And the answer is not necessarily. Because I'd throw back to you, okay, how much sodium is in your blood? How much are you losing in sweat? What are you getting back in that drink? Here's the math. If you were just replacing what was your plasma, in other words, what's in your blood, your sports drink would need to contain 8 grams of salt per quart. Nobody does that. I mean, that's a ridiculous amount. If we look at, if you're just trying to replace sweat, how much salt does sweat have? Sweat is, 1 to 3 grams of salt per quart. And your sports drink? By and large, your sports drink is more dilute than your sweat. So every liter you sweat out and then you have your sports drink, you're still losing. You're still losing. And this is one of the problems, is that we have a lot of people out there who are ending up hypernatremic because they think they're replacing their electrolytes via their sports drink, but they're still behind. And so they're now at, say, mile 30 of a 50-mile race, and they don't even realize it. They're running 5–10% slower than they could be. And remember what we said at the outset? All of us here, we're middle of the packers. That 5% can move us quite a bit forward. So, you need to understand this. You need to be replacing something stronger than your sports drink. And we can come to that afterwards. Otherwise, you will get hyponatremia. Next slide. Okay, back to science on how to be cheap. You can buy electrolyte caplets online. So I looked up on Amazon. Here's one of the brands, Salt Stick, $20. So that's easy. 10 caps, it's $2. So any of you who are out there buying this stuff, every 10 capsules, that's $2. And you know that complicated slide I put up there? I bet you this runner has no idea what that $2 is actually getting her. What difference does 10 capsules make? So go back through this presentation afterwards. It's your homework assignment. You can go figure out what that makes. Anyhow, we're talking about being cheap and cheerful here. So all of you who are paying attention during high school chemistry, you know that those 10 capsules, because you read the label, this is an terribly important skill, folks. Read labels. Because it tells you how much sodium, potassium, and what have you's in it. And now you can be a cheap bastard. Go figure out the 10 caps has 2 grams of sodium, a little more than half a gram of potassium, and so on. And you could get that from, guess what? About 5.5 grams of salt, a little over a gram of salt substitute plus 1 Rolade. Cost way less than 10 cents. This is why you need to pay attention in school to your science classes, and you need to be able to read, because it's all there. So, do you want to spend $2 for 10 capsules where you don't even know what it's going to do for you? Or do you want to spend 10 cents on exactly the same? I'll let you figure. Now we get to something which is in the literature, but not widely publicized. The primary reason your muscles get tired when you're running a marathon, an ultramarathon, is because of oxidative stress. Because as you burn fuel, you produce oxidative radicals, and these radicals attack other chemicals in your cells. Well, we've been around a long time, and muscle cells have antioxidants in them which are designed to mop up those radicals. And that really the primary two that are worth knowing about, and there are more, but two we can do something about, is coenzyme Q10. You go down to any vitamin store, you can find that. And there's another chemical which I'm pretty sure you won't have heard of called glutathione. You don't need to be able to remember what that is because of what I'm about to tell you next. So CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, go buy it, dirt cheap, easy. The science lesson here is you need to understand that glutathione is made from an amino acid, cysteine. An amino acid is readily available. You can get powdered cysteine, get in lots of forms. Your body uses that to make that. And let me tell you, when you're out on a run, because we've proven this, you don't have nearly enough cysteine on board to make enough of this. So one of the reasons why people get fatigued is because they don't have enough glutathione, and they can fix that by taking cysteine. You take cysteine on the hoof, your body will make more glutathione, and your muscles will feel better. And guess what? You got the message now? Dirt cheap. It's readily available. Next. Okay. Here's the proof. And let me explain here that when you crack open a running magazine or a sports magazine and you see a supplement being advertised, we've done the statistics on this now. The chance of that being actually backed up by a rigorous scientific study appears to be 0. So one good thing is if it's advertised in a sports magazine, don't waste your money on it. And the irony is the stuff I'm telling you is dirt cheap, so nobody can make any money on it. That's why it's not advertised in sports magazines. Yeah, logical, eh? Makes sense. You see, science works. Okay, here's what they did. They took some cyclists and they divided them into 2 groups at random, and they gave one of the groups cysteine and one of the groups nothing. And this is something, there's nothing else you take home from this. The only studies really worth considering are randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials. That is the gold standard. So I can assure you everything you see published in the running magazines and peddled, the one thing you can almost certainly bet is it's failed here. They never did that. Double-blinded means that, and this is worth knowing because when you take drugs or anything else, you want to know what quality testing. Double-blinded means the person who was taking had no idea whether they were getting the compound or the placebo, and that the person giving it to them had no idea either. Because the fact is, If I know what you're getting, I can give you a sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I think this is the one that works. You know, subtle things can be communicated. So double-blinded is essential. Anyhow, they took these cyclists and they exercised them at 92% of their VO2 max, and they exercised them to exhaustion. The cyclists who got cysteine lasted 25% longer. That is huge. You think about lasting 25% longer on a 100-miler. These folks here in Spain, they did the following. They gave CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, to some people. They had them run a 50-kilometer, that's 30-mile course, with 10,000 feet of climb in it, and they measured them for all the markers of oxidative stress. And this is the quote from that paper. This is what they found. And looking at the graphs on that paper, they're absolutely right. There was an impressive difference in the amount of oxidative damage going on. So there seems to be hard stuff for taking cysteine and hard evidence for taking CoQ10. So what? You are all experimentalists. So here's an experiment you can try. Cysteine and CoQ10, you know, they're out there, millions of people have been taking them, so as far as we know, they're no more poisonous than anything else you're taking. And remember, whether something is toxic or not is all about dosage. So if I immerse your head in a bucket of water for a few minutes, it's pretty lethal. So even water is poisonous. So the dosages you'll see on these bottles, they're fine. And remember, I'm not a doctor, so don't blame me. But if you wanted to replicate these experiments, you might take a cysteine capsule every 5 miles, and I noticed coenzyme Q10 comes in a few different strengths, either 100 milligrams, or Costco, I notice, is flogging it at 300 milligram thing. So the 100 milligram dosage, you could take that every 5 miles. And here's what you might want to look out for. It's not going to make you a faster sprinter. This is all about minimizing damage that accumulates as the miles go by. If it's working for you, what you're going to find is that mile 30, you notice, you know, I'm still kind of running these hills. You know, this hill doesn't seem so bad. And, you know, if you're my age and as incompetent as I am, that's pretty good when you're overtaking people who are half your age. You may find that, you know, at the end, you know, you're feeling pretty good. And, you know, you might also find that you're willing to do that. Because I can tell you a lot of people who finish ultras are not willing to do a deep knee bend. And it's because of oxidative stress to their quads. And you might notice in the days after, hey, I'm not as sore as I used to be. So that's an experiment you can run. And I've told you the simple science behind it. It's just really mitigating oxidative stress, and it's a dirt cheap experiment to run. And if it works for you, easy to do. Cramps. So lots of people, all of us at some point will experience cramps. And a lot of people think it has to do with electrolytes. And the answer is no, it doesn't. If your electrolytes were so off balance as to get cramps, it would be every single muscle in your body having cramps. Let me make a simple observation. The only muscles you ever get cramps in as an athlete are the ones you're working. So if you're running, you get a cramp in your leg, in a leg muscle. You don't get a cramp, you know, in your little finger, for example. It's thought that cramps are actually to do with fatigue in the nervous system. But there's one problem with this. Nobody who works in a physiology lab knows how to reproduce cramps. It's an interesting fact. There is no protocol where we can induce cramps, which means we can't actually test any of these hypotheses. Big problem. So it's actually unknown. So the speculation is that it's neural fatigue, but we don't really know. So next time somebody tells you they know what causes cramps, yeah, well, maybe. And here's a fun part, because, you know, having told you a few things that we do know, let me tell you about some of the things which are just really total mysteries out there. Let's start with your brain. And anybody who has a parent or is a parent knows that human brains really are mysterious, whenever you look at another family member. But since we're talking science here, interesting fact, your brain is 20% of your energy expenditure. You know, that little pea-sized thing sitting in your cranium is chewing up 20% of your calories. And fun little thing, that's more than your quads, right? And we're all runners. We worry much more about our quads and how our quads are doing than how our brains are doing. And so you might say, well, okay, how hard is your brain working? Well, let's do a calculation here. If you run 100 miles, and let's assume there are 1,000 steps in a mile, you know, roughly 2 yards a pace. That'd be a pretty big pace. Your brain and all the nerves have to fire 100,000 times in a row, and they have to get it right 100,000 times in a row. Because you know what happens when they don't get it right? You go rubber side up, right? That's pretty impressive, isn't it? I mean, that basically 100,000 times in succession, it can do it. I mean, how many times can you... Who here has done 100,000 math problems and got them all right? Thought so. But your brain can do it. Okay. And the 100,000 times, all those nerve cells have to pump sodium one way, potassium the other way, then reverse course. They have neurotransmitters they have to make. They have to make them, they have to squeeze them out, they have to absorb them, they have to resynthesize them 100,000 times. Which kind of leaves you wondering, well, I understand why my legs feel tired after 100,000 contractions, so what the hell is happening to my nervous system? I mean, do nerves bonk? I mean, we know muscles bonk. You know, they run out of oomph, you know, don't feed them enough. You know, is this why people cramp? This one actually partially is yes. You know, nerves are just, you know, they're just fatigued and they get out of whack, and that's probably how cramps happen. Okay, who can recommend a good book on the neurophysiology of endurance exercise? No one. And you know the reason? Because it hasn't been written, because no one knows. So here we have the most important organ in your body. It is absolutely vital to your athletic performance for running, and we don't know squat about how to train it. It's remarkable. You know, that's why I say, what's wrong with this picture? I find this incredible that we know zip about training the nervous system for endurance sports. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't bore you to tears, but please, science is valuable and it can make a big difference to your running careers.